A millionaire, Preston Langley, strides through a world of glass towers and whispered deals, his golden hair catching the city's restless glow. Yet, beneath his tailored suits, exhaustion festers, his wealth a hollow crown. Seeking solace, he steps into Serenity Vale Spa, where Zara Whitmore, a blonde masseuse with hazel eyes and unshakable integrity, unravels more than his tension. She challenges his very existence. What begins as a brazen offer spirals into a clash of pride and principle, leading to a love that defies money's grasp. This is A Tycoon's Redemption, a podcast tale of passion and transformation. Follow Preston's pursuit through moments of humiliation, jealousy, and tender vulnerability, as Zara's quiet strength reshapes his heart. Each chapter weaves their journey from defiance to devotion, perfect for unwinding before sleep. How will Zara's secrets shift Preston's world? Rate this story 0 to 10 in the comments. What sparks your curiosity? Share your thoughts and let's unravel this romance together. Preston Langley was a man forged in the crucible of ambition, a 38-year-old CFO whose golden hair and storm-gray eyes commanded boardrooms where fortunes shifted with a glance. His tailored suits, sharp as the deals he brokered, cloaked a restlessness that gnawed at his core. Wealth had bought him a penthouse of glass and steel, a fleet of cars that purred like contented beasts, and the fleeting adoration of those who chased his shadow. But tonight, as the city's twilight skyline glittered beyond the tinted windows of his Bentley, exhaustion clung to him like damp fog. The weight of endless negotiations, whispered betrayals, and the hollow clink of champagne flutes had worn him thin. He craved a reprieve, a place where his name meant nothing, where the world's demands could not follow. "Find me a quiet spa," he said, his voice low, edged with a fatigue that bordered on desperation. The words cut through the hum of the Bentley's engine, sharp enough to make his driver, Marcus, glance into the rearview mirror. Marcus, a stoic man with a face carved by years of silent loyalty, raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Beside him, Preston's assistant, Nora, perched with her tablet, her fingers dancing across the screen with practiced efficiency. "There's a place," Nora said, her tone cautious, as if testing the waters of his mood. "Serenity Vale Spa, tucked away in the old quarter. It's understated, discreet, no paparazzi, no socialites. Their therapists are said to be exceptional." Preston's lips twitched, a ghost of a smirk breaking through the tension in his jaw. "Exceptional? That's a bold claim. Fine, get me there." The Bentley glided through the city's arteries, weaving past neon-lit towers and bustling avenues until the streets narrowed. The urban pulse fading into a quieter rhythm. The spa appeared almost out of place, its modest brick facade a defiant relic amid the city's polished veneer. A hand-carved sign, etched with a blooming valerian flower, hung above the entrance, its weathered wood curling in quiet rebellion against the surrounding sprawl. Preston stepped out, the cool evening air brushing his skin as he loosened his silk tie. The street was near silent, save for the distant murmur of traffic, a rare pocket of stillness that felt almost sacred. Inside, Serenity Vale was a sanctuary of understated warmth. No gaudy chandeliers or cloying incense assaulted the senses. Instead, soft amber light spilled from sconces, and the faint scent of cedarwood wove through the air like a whispered promise. The receptionist, Lila, greeted him with a smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. Her graying hair swept into a neat bun. Her warmth was genuine, not the rehearsed polish of luxury resorts, and it disarmed Preston, if only for a moment. "Good evening, sir," Lila said, her voice as soothing as the space around her. "Full-body massage?" Preston nodded, his gaze sweeping the room, taking in the bamboo accents and the gentle trickle of a hidden fountain. "Your best therapist," he said, his tone firm, "and I value privacy." "Of course," Lila replied, unfazed, as if such requests were routine. "Zara's available. She's our most requested. Follow me." She led him down a narrow hallway, the walls adorned with simple watercolor sketches of wildflowers, to a small room where candles flickered, casting golden shadows across bamboo paneling. A massage table, draped in crisp white linens, stood at the center, an invitation to surrender. "Make yourself comfortable," Lila said, closing the door with a soft click. Preston shed his suit, the silk tie and starched shirt, falling away like armor he no longer needed. In a plush robe, he lay face down on the table, the tension in his shoulders, a map of battles fought in corporate towers. The air was warm, heavy with the promise of relief, and for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to breathe. The door opened, and a voice, clear and melodic, broke the silence. "Good evening. I'm Zara. May I begin?" He turned his head slightly, catching a glimpse of her. Zara Whitmore was a vision, her long blonde hair cascading over her shoulders, framing a face of porcelain beauty. Her hazel eyes, flecked with gold, held a quiet strength, and her presence seemed to still the very air. She moved with grace, her hands deftly preparing oils, her expression one of serene focus. Preston, accustomed to commanding attention, felt an unfamiliar pull, curiosity that bordered on hunger. "Yes," he said, his voice softer than intended. "Go ahead." Her touch was a revelation. Precise, yet gentle, her fingers found the knots in his muscles with an almost uncanny intuition, unraveling them with steady pressure. Each stroke seemed to peel away layers of stress, exposing a vulnerability he hadn't acknowledged in years. The room faded, leaving only the rhythm of her hands and the faint sound of his own breathing. For the first time in months, Preston felt seen, not as a titan of finance, but as a man stripped of titles and triumphs. "How long have you been doing this?" he asked, the question slipping out unbidden, a rare breach of his guarded nature. Her voice was steady, unhurried. "Long enough to know when a body carries more than physical weight." He chuckled, a low, surprised sound that echoed in the quiet. "Is that your way of saying I'm a mess?" "It's my way of saying you need this," she replied, her tone warm but professional, her focus never wavering. The words landed like a soft blow, piercing the armor he'd built over years of calculated detachment. No one had spoken to him with such quiet authority, free of flattery or agenda. Her hands moved to his lower back, and a shiver ran through him, not from cold, but from the rare sensation of being cared for without expectation. He stole another glance, noting the curve of her cheek, the way her lips pressed together in concentration. She was beautiful, yes, but it was her detachment, her refusal to be swayed by his presence, that hooked him. The session ended too soon. Zara stepped back, washing her hands as he sat up, the robe slipping slightly. "Thank you," he said, testing her reaction, his voice laced with a charm that usually melted resistance. She only nodded, her smile polite but distant, already preparing to leave. The dismissal, subtle as it was, stung in a way he couldn't name, a challenge he hadn't expected. He dressed in silence, his mind racing, the city's pulse a distant memory. At the front desk, Lila processed his payment, her cheer undimmed. Preston leaned in, lowering his voice. "Zara, she's single." Lila's eyes twinkled, as if she'd heard the question before. "Oh, Zara's a mystery. Very private. Never dated from what I know. Turns down every offer, no matter how charming." Preston's brow arched. "Every offer?" "Everyone," Lila said, a hint of pride in her voice. "She's got her own code." He stepped into the night, the cool air sharp against his flushed skin. The Bentley waited, its engine a soft purr, but Preston lingered, glancing back at the Valerian sign. A woman who rejected advances with the ease of breathing, who saw through his wealth without a flicker of awe. Zara Whitmore was no ordinary therapist. She was a cipher, a puzzle wrapped in serenity, and Preston Langley, for all his power, was captivated. As Marcus opened the car door, Preston's mind churned. He'd built empires by decoding complexities, bending the world to his will. But this woman, with her steady hands and unshakable calm, was a challenge he couldn't resist. He settled into the back seat, a slow smile spreading across his face. Tomorrow he'd return, not for a massage, but for her. The city woke with a restless hum, but Preston Langley was already restless, his mind tethered to the memory of Zara Whitmore's serene defiance. Her hands, unraveling his tension at Serenity Vale Spa, had left an imprint deeper than physical relief. Her calm rejection of his charm, coupled with Lila's revelation that Zara turned down every suitor, had ignited a fascination that kept him pacing his penthouse through the night. The skyline glittered beyond his floor-to-ceiling windows, a testament to his dominance. Yet, it felt like a cage. By dawn, his decision was made. He'd return to the spa, not for solace, but to crack the enigma of Zara, the masseuse who saw through his wealth with unnerving clarity. He strode into his glass-walled office at 6:01 a.m., the city still cloaked in shadow. His assistant, Nora, was already there, sorting emails with her usual efficiency. "Cancel my morning," Preston said. His voice clipped, brooking no argument. "I'm unavailable until noon." Nora's brow furrowed, her fingers pausing over her tablet. "Sir, the merger call with the overseas investors. Reschedule it," he snapped, grabbing his coat. "And don't call me unless the building's on fire." The Bentley purred through the city's waking streets, delivering him to Serenity Vale Spa just as Lila flipped the open sign. The valerian flower sign seemed to glow in the morning light, a beacon pulling him in. Lila's warm smile greeted him, though her eyes held a flicker of surprise. "Back so soon, Mr. Langley. Zara's free if you're after her." "No one else," he said, his tone leaving no room for debate. Lila nodded, unfazed, and led him to the familiar candlelit room. The air was thick with cedarwood, but it did little to calm the storm brewing in his chest. He shed his suit, the silk tie and cufflinks discarded with a carelessness that betrayed his urgency. In the plush robe, he paced the small space, his pulse quickening at the thought of her. Zara Whitmore wasn't just a therapist. She was a challenge, and Preston Langley never backed down from one. The door opened, and Zara stepped in, her blonde hair tied loosely, her hazel eyes as serene as the night before. "Good morning," she said, her voice a soft melody that both soothed and provoked him. "Ready to begin?" "Preston," he corrected, settling onto the table, his gray eyes locked on her. "Let's skip the formalities today," she nodded, her expression unchanged, and began preparing her oils. Her hands moved with the same precision, finding the tension in his shoulders as if she'd mapped it overnight. But Preston wasn't here for relief. He wanted her attention, her secrets, her. As her fingers pressed into his muscles, he broke the silence. "You're different, Zara. You don't care who I am, do you?" Her hands didn't falter. "My job is to heal, not to care about titles." The answer was smooth, almost rehearsed, and it stoked his curiosity. He pushed harder. "And if I want more than healing, what then?" Her fingers paused, just for a heartbeat before resuming. "I keep boundaries, Preston, even with interesting clients." "Interesting?" he smirked, turning his head to catch her eye. "So I'm interesting." "You're persistent," she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips, but her focus remained on her work. The room seemed to shrink, the air charged with unspoken challenges. Preston sat up, the robe slipping slightly, his voice low and deliberate. "Dinner tonight. Just you and me. No expectations." Her eyes met his, steady and unyielding. "No." The word landed like a blade, sharp and final. Preston's smirk faded, replaced by a flicker of disbelief. No one said no to him, not in boardrooms where empires bowed, nor in the fleeting liaisons that filled his nights. He leaned closer, testing her resolve. "You don't know what you're missing, Zara." "I know exactly what I'm missing," she replied, her tone calm but resolute. "And I'm not interested." His jaw tightened, pride warring with fascination. He reached into his blazer, draped over a chair, and pulled out a slim envelope. The paper was crisp, heavy with intent. He held it out, his voice a velvet challenge. $10 million. One night. Total privacy. No strings, no follow-ups. Zara's expression hardened, her hazel eyes flashing with something fiercer than anger. Disappointment. She took the envelope, but instead of opening it, she placed it gently on the table beside him. "I've thought about it, Preston," she said, her voice steady as steel. "It's still no." He blinked, the rejection slicing through his confidence like a razor. "You're turning down $10 million? "I'm turning down the idea of selling my soul," she said, her words cutting deeper than he expected. "Money doesn't buy what I value." The silence was deafening, broken only by the faint flicker of candles. Preston stared at her, his mind racing. He'd closed billion-dollar deals with a handshake, bent rivals to his will with a glance. Yet this woman, in a modest spa room, had dismantled his power with a single word. He lay back, his pride bruised but his fascination ablaze. "You're serious," he said almost to himself. "I am," she replied, resuming the massage with a touch that felt both gentle and unyielding. Her hands worked his shoulders, but the tension in the room was no longer physical. It was a battle of wills, and for the first time, Preston wasn't sure he'd win. As she moved to his lower back, he tried again, softer this time. "Why? Why say no to something that could change your life?" "My life doesn't need changing," she said, her voice quieter now, almost kind. "Not like that." Her words carried a weight that silenced him, a truth he couldn't argue with. She wasn't just rejecting his money. She was rejecting the version of him that thought money could buy everything. The realization stung, but it also sparked something new, a grudging respect. He'd never met anyone who stood so firmly in their truth, untouched by the allure of wealth. The session ended, and Zara stepped away, washing her hands as if the exchange had been nothing more than a passing breeze. Preston dressed slowly, his eyes never leaving her. She was a fortress, her calm exterior hiding depths he was desperate to explore. At the door, he paused, turning to her. "This isn't over," he said, his voice low, a promise as much as a challenge. She met his gaze, unflinching. "That's up to you." He left the room, the envelope still on the table, its contents untouched. Outside, the city roared back to life, but Preston felt a shift within him. Zara Whitmore wasn't just a puzzle. She was a mirror, reflecting a man he barely recognized. As he slid into the Bentley, a slow smile spread across his face. He'd be back. Not to buy her, but to understand her. And maybe, just maybe, to find the man he could be in her eyes. The dawn broke over the city with a cruel clarity, its light exposing the cracks in Preston Langley's carefully constructed world. Zara Whitmore's rejection, her calm refusal of his $10 million offer, and the audacity of her words, "I don't sell my soul," had left him reeling, his pride a raw wound. No one had ever said no to him. Not in the boardrooms where empires bent to his will, nor in the fleeting liaisons that punctuated his nights. Yet Zara, a masseuse with hazel eyes and unshakable resolve, had done so with a quiet strength that both infuriated and enthralled him. Her dismissal lingered like a fever, and as he stood in his penthouse, the city's skyline glittering beyond the glass, He felt caged by his own power. He'd vowed to return to Serenity Vale Spa, not to buy her, but to unravel her. But first, he needed control over her, over himself. He arrived at the spa before its doors opened, the valerian flower sign a taunting reminder of his defeat. The city was still stirring, but Preston's resolve was razor sharp. He'd confront Zara, demand answers, and pierce the mystery of her unyielding principles. Lila, the receptionist, looked up with a flicker of surprise as he strode in, his tailored coat billowing like a storm cloud. "Mr. Langley," she said, her warmth tinged with caution. "Early today. Zara's not in yet, but—" "I'll wait," he cut in, his voice a low growl. He settled into a wicker chair in the lobby, his gray eyes fixed on the door, his fingers tapping an impatient rhythm. The cedarwood-scented air did nothing to soothe the fire in his chest. Minutes stretched into an eternity, each tick of the clock fueling his agitation. When Zara finally appeared, her blonde hair loose and her hazel eyes serene, his pulse surged. She paused, sensing his intensity, but her expression remained composed. "Preston," she said, nodding toward the massage room. "This way." The candlelit room felt smaller today, the air thick with unspoken tension. Preston didn't bother with the robe, standing in his suit as Zara prepared her oils. "I need an explanation," he said, his voice sharp, cutting through the silence. "Why did you turn me down?" She met his gaze, unflinching. "I told you, I don't sell myself." "That's not an answer," he snapped, stepping closer. $10 million, Zara. No one says no to that. No one. Her hands stilled, her hazel eyes piercing his. "I did, and I meant it." His temper flared, the rejection a fresh wound. "You think you're better than me? That your principles make you untouchable?" He loomed over her, his presence commanding, but she didn't recoil. "Everyone has a price. Name yours." "Nothing," she said, her voice steady as stone. "Not everything is for sale, Preston." The words hit like a slap, his pride buckling under their weight. He paced the room, his hands clenching. "You're making a mistake," he said, his tone darkening. "You don't know who I am. I could buy this spa, fire you, ruin you." Her lips pressed into a thin line, but her calm held. "And you don't know who I am. Maybe that's what scares you." The accusation stopped him cold, his breath catching. Scared? Him, the man who'd crushed rivals and built fortunes? Yet her words burrowed deep, exposing a truth he couldn't face. He leaned in, his voice a dangerous whisper. "You'll regret this, Zara. You have no idea what I'm capable of." She crossed her arms, her gaze unwavering. "I think I do. And I'm still here." The standoff was electric, the room crackling with their clashing wills. Preston's frustration boiled over, and he stormed toward the door, slamming it behind him. The sound echoed through the lobby, drawing gasps from Lila and a young employee, who fumbled with her phone, capturing the moment. Preston didn't notice, his vision clouded by rage as he pushed through the glass doors and into the waiting Bentley. "Drive!" he barked, sinking into the leather, his heart pounding with a mix of fury and fascination. By noon, his world unraveled further. Nora called, her voice tight with panic. "Sir, there's a video online, it's you, leaving the spa. It's gone viral. 100,000 views already." Preston's phone buzzed with alerts, each one a dagger. He opened the link and there it was, his furious exit, captioned, "Tycoon shot down by masseuse." The comments were merciless. "Money can't buy class. She humbled him in seconds." "What a loser." His face burned. The public humiliation a wound deeper than any deal gone sour. The world saw him as a fool, a rich man brought low by a woman who wouldn't bend. He hurled his phone across the office, the glass screen shattering against the wall. His empire, His reputation, now mocked on screens across the city. All because of her. Zara Whitmore, with her serene defiance, had turned his power into a punchline. He called his investigator, Cole, his voice cold as ice. "Find everything on Zara Whitmore. Her past, her secrets, her weaknesses. I want it all, now." Cole's reply was measured. "She's a ghost, sir. Barely any records, but I'll dig. Anything specific?" "Everything," Preston said, his eyes narrowing. "She's hiding something, I know it." As Cole hung up, Preston leaned back, staring at the city beyond his office windows. The skyline, once a symbol of his triumphs, now felt like a prison. Zara wasn't just a challenge. She was a mirror, reflecting a man he didn't recognize. A man who'd lost control, not just of her, but of himself. His pride demanded retribution, but a deeper part of him, buried beneath the anger, craved something else. Her respect, her truth. He stood, grabbing his coat. The video had exposed him, but it also lit a fire. He'd uncover her secrets, not to destroy her, but to understand her, to prove he was more than the man she'd rejected. As he stepped into the elevator, a plan took shape. He'd attend a charity gala at Meridian Hall, a glittering stage where the elite flaunted their power. If Zara was tied to someone like Julian Whitmore, the spa's mysterious owner, she might appear. He'd confront her there, not with threats, but with the weight of his presence. Zara Whitmore had won this round, but the game was far from over, and Preston Langley never lost twice. The city pulsed beneath a sky of molten gold, but Preston Langley's world was a tempest of his own making. The viral video of his humiliated exit from Serenity Vale Spa, tycoon shot down by masseuse, had spread like wildfire, its mocking captions searing into his pride. Each notification was a fresh wound, transforming his name into a punchline across boardrooms and social feeds. Zara Whitmore, with her serene defiance and unshakable principles, had not only rejected his $10 million offer, but had unwittingly turned him into a spectacle. Yet, beneath the fury, a deeper hunger gnawed, to unravel her, to understand the woman who dared to say no. His investigator, Cole, had delivered a frustratingly thin file. Zara Whitmore, 30, a ghost with no digital footprint, just a high school diploma and a photo with Julian Whitmore, Serenity Vale's millionaire owner, captioned, "My rock." The sight of them together sparked a new emotion: envy. Who was Julian to her? A mentor? A lover? The ambiguity fueled a possessive urge to claim Zara's attention, to eclipse whoever held her loyalty. Determined to confront her, Preston accepted an invitation to a charity gala at the opulent Meridian Hall, a dazzling stage where the city's elite flaunted their power. If Zara was tied to Julian, she might appear, and he'd seize the chance to reassert himself. The gala was a glittering affair, chandeliers casting prisms of light over black-tie guests sipping champagne. Preston, in a tailored tuxedo, his golden hair gleaming, moved through the crowd with practiced charm, but his gray eyes scanned relentlessly. Then he saw her. Zara stood across the ballroom, a vision in an emerald gown that hugged her curves, her blonde hair cascading in soft waves. She laughed, her hand resting lightly on the arm of a tall man in a charcoal suit, Julian Whitmore. Their ease, the way her smile brightened for him, sent a jolt of jealousy through Preston's veins. His grip tightened on his glass, the crystal nearly cracking. She was his enigma, not Julian's. He crossed the room, his stride purposeful, his smile a calculated mask. "Zara," he said, his voice smooth but laced with possession. "Didn't expect to see you here." Her laughter faded, her hazel eyes narrowing as she registered his tone. "Preston," she said, her voice cool, stepping slightly away from Julian. "This is Julian Whitmore." Julian extended a hand, his hazel eyes twinkling with amusement. "Her brother," he said, his grip firm. And you are... Preston's face flushed, the jealousy dissolving into a mix of relief and embarrassment. Preston Langley, he said, recovering quickly. I've heard Zara mention someone special. The lie slipped out effortlessly, a gambit to gauge her reaction. Julian's grin widened. Oh, she's told me about a persistent guy. That you, Langley? Zara's cheeks pinked, her composure faltering for the first time. Julian, she murmured, shooting him a look. Preston's heart leapt. She'd talked about him. The revelation was a spark, igniting a new resolve. He leaned closer, his voice low. Zara, can we talk? Alone? She hesitated, her eyes searching his but nodded. 5 minutes. Julian raised an eyebrow but stepped back, joining a nearby group. Preston led her through a side door to a secluded balcony, the city's lights sprawling below like a sea of stars. The cool night air did little to temper the heat in his chest. He faced her, his usual confidence shaken by her proximity, the emerald gown accentuating her elegance. I owe you an apology, he began, his voice softer than he intended. That $10 million offer was crass. I thought I could impress you, but I insulted you. I'm sorry. Zara studied him, her guard still up, her hazel eyes piercing through his facade. Why does it matter, Preston? You could have anyone. He stepped closer, the space between them charged. Because you're not just anyone. You saw through me. My money, my title, and you didn't flinch. No one's ever done that. His words hung in the air, raw and unguarded, a confession he hadn't planned. Her expression softened, a flicker of curiosity replacing her wariness. I don't care about your wealth, she said, her voice quiet but firm. I care about who you are when the world isn't watching. The sincerity in her words disarmed him, peeling back layers he'd long buried. For a moment, they stood in silence, the city's hum a distant pulse. Then, impulsively, Zara leaned forward, pressing a gentle kiss to his cheek. The warmth of her lips sent a shock through him, unraveling his restraint. Unable to stop himself, he cupped her face, his thumbs brushing her jaw, and kissed her, a slow, searing kiss that felt like a vow. Her breath hitched, but she didn't pull away, her hands resting lightly on his chest. When they parted, her eyes sparkled with surprise, a flush coloring her cheeks. I didn't expect that, she whispered, a smile tugging at her lips. Neither did I, he said, grinning, his heart pounding. But I want more. Dinner tomorrow? No envelopes, no deals, just us. She hesitated, then nodded, her smile tentative but genuine. Just us. As they returned to the ballroom, Julian's knowing glance met them, but Preston barely noticed. The envy that had driven him was gone, replaced by a fragile hope. Zara wasn't Julian's. She was her own, and she'd chosen to step closer to him. The gala's glamour faded, the crowd a blur. All that mattered was her, and the promise of a tomorrow where he might prove himself worthy of her trust. But as he watched her rejoin the crowd, a new question stirred. What truths did she guard, and could he earn the right to know them? The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, Preston felt ready to walk it, not as a tycoon, but as a man chasing something real. The aftertaste of Zara Whitmore's kiss lingered on Preston Langley's lips, a searing promise forged on the Meridian Hall balcony under a canopy of stars. Her words, "I care about who you are when the world isn't watching," had cracked his defenses, and her tentative nod to dinner had set his heart ablaze. The viral video, the mocking headlines, the $10 million offer, all faded against the fragile hope of her smile. As they re-entered the gala, her hand brushing his arm, Preston felt a shift. Zara had chosen to step closer, and he was determined to prove he deserved it, not as the tycoon who'd tried to buy her, but as a man willing to earn her trust. The city's glitter dimmed. All that mattered was the path they might carve together. The next evening, Preston stood outside a quiet bistro, its warm lights spilling onto cobblestone streets. He'd traded his tailored suit for a simple blazer and slacks, driven himself in a modest sedan, craving the normalcy Zara seemed to embody. When she arrived, his breath caught. Her blonde hair fell loose, framing her porcelain face, and her emerald dress hugged her curves with understated grace. "You're early," she said, her hazel eyes twinkling with amusement. "Couldn't wait," he admitted, holding the door. Inside, they settled at a corner table, the hum of conversation and clink of glasses, a soft backdrop. Over candlelight and shared plates of pasta, Preston found himself disarmed by her ease. She spoke of sketching wildflowers in her rare free moments, the peace of helping clients breathe easier at Serenity Vale. Her world, so unlike his, was a tapestry of small joys, and he hung on every word. "You're not what I expected," he said, leaning forward. "Most people in my world chase status. You're real." Zara's smile was wry. "Your world sounds exhausting. I'd rather live in mine, where a good day means making a difference." Her honesty pierced him, a reminder of the emptiness he'd masked with wealth. He reached for her hand, his thumb grazing her knuckles. "Tell me about your world, then." She hesitated, her gaze dropping to their joined hands. "It hasn't always been simple," she said, her voice quieter. "Julian and I lost our parents when I was 15. A fire. He was 19, barely an adult, but he became my anchor. Worked nights to pay for my art studies, kept us together. When I burned out, he opened Serenity Vale, gave me a place to heal by helping others." Her hazel eyes met his, raw with vulnerability. "That's why I don't bend, Preston. I've rebuilt myself once. I won't lose that." Her confession cracked something open in him. He'd spent years building walls, equating vulnerability with weakness, but her strength in sharing her pain was a revelation. "I've never had that," he said, his voice low. "Family, I mean. My parents saw me as a line item in their portfolio. I learned early that money buys control, not connection. Until you." The admission slipped out, unguarded, and her fingers tightened around his. "You're more than your money, Preston," she said, her gaze steady. "But you have to believe that too." The words landed like a challenge, stirring a resolve he hadn't known he possessed. They lingered over dessert, trading stories of forgotten dreams. His boyhood wished to explore distant shores, her love for painting landscapes she'd never seen. When they stepped into the cool night, he walked her to her car, the city's pulse a distant hum. "I don't want this to end," he said, stopping under a street lamp. Her smile was soft, and before he could overthink it, he kissed her again, slower this time, savoring the warmth of her lips. She leaned into him, her hands on his chest, and the world fell away. Their dates became a rhythm, quiet dinners, walks through hidden parks, moments where titles and wealth dissolved. Each encounter peeled back layers, revealing a Zara who laughed freely at his dry humor and a Preston who listened without agenda. One night, in a rooftop garden strung with fairy lights, he opened up further. "I've been lonely," he admitted, staring at the city below. "Surrounded by people, but no one sees me. You do." She touched his cheek, her eyes fierce. "Because you let me. That's not weakness, Preston, it's courage." Her words were a balm, healing wounds he hadn't named. He kissed her fiercely, the intensity a promise to be the man she saw. Over 5 months, their bond deepened with every shared vulnerability. Preston learned to savor her world, helping her sketch at dawn, carrying supplies at Serenity Vale, feeling useful in ways his boardroom never allowed. Zara, in turn, stepped into his, attending a low-key charity event on his arm, her grace outshining the elite. Julian, ever protective, watched with approval, confiding to Preston one evening, "She's tough, but her heart's soft. Don't break it." "I won't," Preston vowed, the weight of his promise grounding him. One evening, in a garden aglow with candles, he stood beneath an arch of ivy, a velvet box in his pocket. Zara arrived, radiant in a silver dress, unaware of his plan. He knelt, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Zara, you taught me love isn't bought, it's earned. You're my truth, my home. Marry me." Tears shimmered in her eyes as she whispered, "Yes." The sapphire ring, chosen for her hazel eyes, slid onto her finger, sealing a bond forged in defiance of his past. As they embraced, the garden glowed, but a new question stirred. Could he build a future as steady as her trust? The path to their wedding lay ahead, and Preston was ready to prove himself worthy. The garden, where Preston Langley proposed to Zara Whitmore, lingered in his memory like a sacred oath, its ivy arch and her tearful yes, a beacon in the chaos of his once empty life. The sapphire ring on her finger, chosen to mirror her hazel eyes, was more than a promise. It was a defiance of the world he'd once ruled, where wealth bought everything but meaning. 5 months had passed since their first kiss on the Meridian Hall balcony, and their love had woven a tapestry of quiet moments. Stolen dinners, her sketches at dawn, his hand steadying hers as they navigated his world of glittering elites. Zara had taught him to see beyond the ledger of power, and he, in turn, had offered her a safe harbor to share her guarded heart. Now, as their wedding day loomed, Preston felt a new tension. Not of doubt, but of the weight of a future he wanted to build right. The Meridian Hall, where their story had shifted with a single kiss, was transformed for their wedding. Its sprawling estate glowed under a late summer sky, chandeliers casting prisms over a sea of white lilies and silk-draped tables. Preston stood in a private suite, adjusting his black tie, his reflection, a man reborn. The tailored tuxedo hugged his frame, his golden hair sleek, but it was the warmth in his gray eyes that marked the change. Julian Whitmore, Zara's brother and now his confidant, clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Nervous, Langley?" he asked, his hazel eyes glinting with mischief. "Terrified," Preston admitted, a wry smile breaking through. "Not of her, but of getting this wrong. She deserves everything." Julian nodded, his usual levity softening. "She does, and you're the first man I've seen who gets that. Don't let her down." The words settled like a charge, and Preston squared his shoulders, ready to meet his bride. The ceremony was set in the estate's garden, where a canopy of fairy lights mimicked the stars of their first kiss. Guests, friends, a few trusted colleagues, and Serenity Vale's staff filled the rows, their murmurs a soft hum. Lila, the spa's receptionist, dabbed her eyes, whispering to a colleague, "Never thought I'd see Zara like this." Preston took his place at the altar, his heart pounding, as a string quartet began a gentle melody. Then Zara appeared, and the world stilled. Her ivory gown flowed like liquid moonlight, delicate lace tracing her shoulders. Her blonde hair swept into a loose chignon adorned with pearls. She walked alone, her choice, a nod to the strength that had carried her through loss and rebuilding. Julian stood at the front, his smile proud, giving her away in spirit. Zara's hazel eyes locked on Preston's, and the vulnerability in her gaze, tempered by fierce love, stole his breath. She reached him, and he took her hands, their warmth grounding him. The officiant's words were a soft cadence, but Preston barely heard them, lost in her. When it came time for vows, he spoke first, his voice steady despite the emotion clawing at his throat. "Zara, you saw me when I was blind, blind to what matters, blind to myself. You taught me that love isn't a transaction, but a choice to be better every day. I promise to choose you, to build with you, to hold you through every storm. You're my truth, my home, and I'll spend my life proving I'm worthy of you." Tears shimmered in her eyes, and her voice, when she spoke, was clear, resonant. "Preston, you showed me that strength isn't in standing alone, but in trusting someone to stand beside you. You saw my scars and called them beautiful, gave me courage to love without fear. I promise to be your partner, your sanctuary, to remind you who you are when the world tries to forget. I love you, not for what you have, but for who you choose to be." The guests sighed, some wiping tears, but Preston and Zara existed only for each other. He slid a gold band beside her sapphire ring, and she placed one on his finger, their hands trembling with the weight of forever. The officiant pronounced them married, and Preston kissed her, a deep, unhurried kiss that sealed their vows, her lips soft and certain against his. The crowd erupted in applause, lily petals raining down as they pulled apart, her smile brighter than the sun. The reception was a whirl of elegance and joy. Under a tent strung with lanterns, guests danced to a live band, their laughter mingling with the clink of champagne flutes. Julian's toast was heartfelt, his voice breaking as he said, "Zara's always been my hero. Preston, you're her match, and I'm proud to call you family." Preston raised his glass, his arm around Zara, feeling a belonging he'd never known. As they danced, her head resting against his chest, he whispered, "You've changed me, Zara. I was lost until you." She looked up, her eyes fierce with love. "And you found me, Preston. We're home now." Later, they slipped away to a quiet corner of the garden, the party's hum fading. Under the fairy lights, he held her close, her gown brushing his shoes. "What's next for us?" she asked, her voice soft. "Everything," he said, kissing her forehead. "A life where we build, not buy. A house with a garden for your sketches. A place for us to be us." She smiled, tracing his jaw. "And you'll still carry my supplies at the spa?" "Always," he laughed, pulling her into another kiss, the promise of their future woven into every touch. The night ended with them driving away, her hand in his, the city lights a backdrop to their new beginning. Preston, once a king of wealth, had found his true empire in her love, a vow of forever that no fortune could rival. Thank you for joining us on this heartfelt journey through A Tycoon's redemption. We hope Preston and Zara's story of love, integrity, and transformation touched your heart. What did you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Did their vows move you? Or which moment lingered most? Rate the tale 0 to 10 and share where you're listening from to keep the conversation alive. Your support means the world, so hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more stories that inspire. Until next time, sweet dreams, and we can't wait to share another tale with you soon.